Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of the Mind Blown Zone. This is part 3 of the legal history overlay. I'm going to kick it right over to Brad so that he can continue from where we left off.
All right. Thanks, Matt. So, I think we left off the last episode talking a little bit about Edward Mendel House and his influence over Woodrow Wilson, as well as FDR. It's involved all through that period. And it certainly shaped some things that were to come during that period. And so I wanted to pick up here in the 1920s. And for those of you who have heard a little bit about these kinds of, freedom slash sovereign slash lawful ideas, this is where the birth certificate situation happens. And prior to this period, most people, if not all, simply would record a birth in the family, either in the family Bible, or they would record it with the local newspaper on the notice board, just let everybody know that such and such family had a son or a daughter and so forth. But this new idea, this birth certificate, and certificate is a word that means that there's some type of financial status when you mention a certificate. And this is where basically they're getting us ready to be monetized. So they're actually monetizing human beings. And
sounds like you can get like stock certificates or something, right?
It's like, well, it's exactly what it is. These certificates are traded on, let's call it a dark stock market. And that people used to be able to find those, but I think it's harder to find now. But if you look at your birth certificate today, you're able to get a look at it, it has a QSIP number on it. And that is literally a unique identifier to this certificate, the birth certificate. And when this started in the 20s, by the way, it was encouraged. Nurses were encouraged to who have children to file these birth certificates to get people accustomed to it, and they would get paid vacation for filling out the birth certificate, like longer than in just the normal 3 or 4 days or whatever they needed to, have their child to recover. They would get these longer periods, paid vacation, and so that. What happens then is the nurses start recommending it to the patients, the mothers that are coming in and having children. So there wasn't any, there wasn't any reason not to do it in effect. And if we come to today, then it's actually, if you were to go into the hospital with your wife, or you had a wife, you would then, and she was having a baby, it'd be very difficult for you to not fill out the birth certificate. In fact, hospital administration, your doctor, your nurses, they're all going to put tremendous amount of pressure on you to do it. They're actually going to tell you you have to do it.
Or you can't get your baby.
And in effect, that's how strong-armed it's got. And, in fairness to them, without that birth certificate, at least in in the Western nations, the Commonwealth nations and so forth, you can't get a job. You can't get a Social Security number in America without a birth certificate. And if you don't have a Social Security number, you can't get a job. So it is going to make life very difficult for somebody who doesn't fill one of these out. So it's an interesting dilemma that we're in. Some people are trying to renounce them, get rid of them, or take control of them. There's all kinds of different strategies people have come up with regarding this birth certificate idea. I think the best of the best is not to worry about it. It's part of the way things work, and you're just going to have to live with the fact that this is what's going on. Some people suggest that today, or since kind of the 1930s, that I'll get to here in a second, the value of the new child is actually initially started out in the weight of the child in the weight in gold. So that's what you can imagine what 7.5 pounds, maybe that's the average weight of a baby. That's quite a bit of gold. And that's what people suggest, although we can't prove this. So it's speculation as to whether that's the fact or not. But
so the birth certificate is part of the legal overlay. It's part of the system put on top of the natural world.
Right. Oh, a huge part. And I'll dive into that, I guess, next here. So if you recall, 1789 is the Constitution. Then 1859 is the bankruptcy, and now it's the 70-year bankruptcy, international bankruptcy rule. So we come forward to 1929, which is the Great Depression, as we call it here in America. And this is the 70-year window when we were not able to pay back the loan, the original loan. Now we are put into deeper hock to the international bankers. And this is the FDR comes in, and this is the 1933, and we could spend hours and hours talking about what was put in place there. But effectively, what happened was humans, their energy, their labor, their very beingness was monetized and handed over to these international bankers as collateral for the bankruptcy. And this
Specifically Americans or everybody?
I know that this idea was exported certainly around the Commonwealth nation. So I don't know exactly when this happened everywhere else, but it's all in use today.
Mm-hmm.
In perhaps most countries, but it's different in different places, different times. But this is when America defaulted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I got to say this was only specific to America. And by monetizing the people, what happened were a couple of different things. Effectively, we went from being men and women to being property. That's probably the key idea that I can convey here, is that we are now the property of the international bankers. Because of that, they had to take away. This is why they had Americans turn in their gold, because that was money. Right? Even though the Federal Reserve had been in place for 20 years at this point, the real money was gold.
Mm-hmm.
And Americans were required by decree of the president to come and exchange their gold for, of course, paper fiat money.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What? And people did it.
Not everybody. There's arguments over how many people obeyed that new edict and how many people secreted their holdings.
Wow, that sounds
But
like the most absurd thing ever. The government just says that you got to come bring your gold in and get
right,
paper for it. We'll take the gold. You'll get paper.
right, yeah. To think that they were able to pull that off is pretty astonishing.
Well, I think it's funny that someone might go, "Oh, come on! Is we're the property of the banksters, really?" But they took the gold from us and gave us paper.
And right, and after they were done with that confiscation, which is really what it was,
right?
They then raised the price of gold. So I forget the exact numbers, but I think it was $23 or $24 an ounce, and they raised it to like $40 an ounce as soon as they got done with the confiscation. There was a 40% increase in its value.
Right.
So quite a trick. And what I like to tell people, I think I mentioned this to you before. Excuse me. So let me dive into as well. They also did this with real estate, property, and homes, and then people also started getting cars, started to become common in the late 30s and 40s here, and you had to then register your property with the state. Excuse me. So Regis, right? That's the king. That's the etymology of that word. Regis is that you're now what, and this is the real trick, is that when you register your house, boat, property, car, you're actually, it's called a split title or divided title. So when you go and sign on the dotted line for your mortgage or your deed, you're actually signing as a tenant, believe it or not. If you look at the lines, it says joint tenant if you're signing with your wife, or tenant in common. So everybody understands the word tenant to mean renter, but there it is right there on the mortgage. And, trying to get that change is impossible. You can't say, I want that to read property owner. Can't get that change made.
All right. I mean, you tell yourself it just says tenant. Like, oh yeah, it's just the person that lives in the house. Yeah, just legal talk, right?
Right. So I don't think I've introduced this idea of split title on this. I've mentioned it to you before, but what happens is that there becomes what's known as legal title and equitable title.
Hmm.
And legal title means you're the owner, so you can dispose of the property at your will. The equitable title is having use and enjoyment privileges. So, in
Okay.
effect, they're allowing you to live in the house, use it, and enjoy it. But if they decide, if one day the people who really owned it, which would be the state or the government, they can decide we want to liquidate this house, and they have the title for that in the legal framework.
Right.
I mean, it would come as a shock to everybody, of course, if suddenly they said we're going to knock down these 5,000 houses or whatever so we can build a stadium. They can
Yeah.
legally do that. Lawfully, they couldn't do it, but legally, they could do it.
Yeah, and I'm sure it happens, right? Like the government just says, yeah, we are going to build a military base here, so or the wall, right? For example, it's
Right.
like, well, you gotta sell your house. It's because and that's by statutory law. You gotta
That's
sell
right.
it. You're
That's
in
right. They'll,
agreement with us, pot
they'll
owner.
give right. They'll give you fair market value for the home, right? So it's not like they're
Hmm.
just taking it away, right? They'll give you your fiat dollars for what that home's worth. But if you don't want to move, you're out of luck,
Hmm.
right? So this isn't something that they exercise, but this is how a police officer can get authority over you is because your car is registered with the state. It's really the state's property. And this is a whole big mess on trying to get your car unregistered. I'm not going to go into any of this today. Get the manufacturer's certificate of origin and all this stuff. It's really complicated. But this is essentially how you're carrying this license, which is actually the property of the state, not really your
Right.
license. It's their license, right? And it's equally that car, that's how they can confiscate your car, so that they technically own it legally.
Yeah, that
Make
whole
sense?
license thing is crazy.
Right.
I always think it's strange that the police officer is going to pull you over and say, "Oh, I want you to do this," and it's like, "Who the hell are you, mate? Buzz off."
Yeah, it's a big, big mess, that's for sure. And people get themselves into some deep pickles. Hopefully I'll talk about this a little bit in the end on my thoughts on
Hmm.
that. But yeah, there's a whole movement of people that try to resist and try to explain what's really going on. And it's a bad idea, needless to say.
Right.
Uh, anyway, so they get the gold, they get the split titles so that they have legal title of our major property, right? Our houses, our cars, so, et cetera. And they do this because property cannot own property. There's the
That's
there's the
interesting.
kicker.
Property cannot
You're
own property.
right. Make sense?
Yep.
You're no longer a man. You are in the legal system. You are now property,
Right.
and this
You're a
goes.
citizen, and you agree, right?
That's right. This goes all the way back to that idea I was sharing in the very beginning that there are two different types of persons. Right? There's this natural person, and there is the artificial or juridical person. And that is, you are now seen in the eyes of the legal system as the artificial person,
Right.
property.
The representative of the corporation created
Yeah.
in all caps letters
Yeah. And I'll dive
on
into
your
that
birth
in a
certificate.
second here. Right. Right. Yeah, I'll get into that in a second here. So the last thing that happened in the 30s, which was pretty devastating, I call it the final blow, is that they merged what had previously been the law of the land, right? The LAW, and what we've called common law, and this other type of law called equity, which
Okay.
which was the right, which was the deal. Basically, only a judge can make final decisions as the representative of the king. Well, this is equity law. So they merged these two together and they called it the Rules of Civil Procedure, is the official name of it.
So you're saying there was some this equity thing, like it existed. It was literally something where the judges were given what permission by the kings to rule or over cases or something.
Yeah, the So this is what they did in England, was that became too much for the king to rule on all these different events that were happening in his kingdom.
Hmm.
It was just too much to deal with every little dispute and spat. And
Right.
so some of these people some of the liege lords said, we'll decide as you would decide, dear king.
Uh-huh.
And this is what it was called chancery. So it was the
Okay.
chancery courts, or the chancel. And that's how this idea got started, that what once the king could just decree something and say, I decree that, Matt, you win this case, and that's my final
Hmm.
decree. That was it.
Right. So he
And
passed that on to people, and then they probably passed it on to other people. And now we have judges under equity law or something.
right, so the judge is that person that the king passed off these decisions to,
Oh,
going
okay.
back 500 years. That's the court of equity, and it's actually a powerful court, and it's a necessary court for a lot of different reasons. So it's not to say that equity is bad, but by merging, here's the key: because they merged them, they knocked out this notion that the judge is the referee and that the jury decides on the law and the facts. That's what it killed.
Hmm.
You understand?
Yep.
Now you go to court, and the judge is the boss, and whatever he says goes, and the bailiff and everybody in the room, whatever he says, that's it. He slams his gavel, it's over. He's the decider, or she's the decider on what happens in your case.
Right. So court used to be you'd have a spat with someone, and then you'd go and you'd want to have a debate with them and an argument, and you'd have this referee, saying, "Oh, wait, hold on, you haven't made sense there, so that's not fair to say." And you'd be like, "Oh, yes, I agree with you, good sir." And they changed a lot, and then you just come to some conclusion, and you present all your case while arguing with the other person, and then a jury would rule. So they replaced that with this judge who, and what he says goes.
Right.
Is
And
that it?
yeah, and the judge is controlled by statute. So he's the interpreter of the statutes. Right.
Ah, he's
He
the
gets to
interpreter of the statutes. Gosh.
right. So,
Right.
and judges it's extremely frowned upon for the judge to decide differently than whatever the standing, they call it case law. Whatever the
Hmm.
previous judges have decided is the right way to interpret the statute is how 99% of the time he's going to stick
Hmm.
with what his predecessors decided.
But all the
And
case
it's a
law is essentially based off the statutory law in the first place, right?
right, right.
Right.
And if you speak to an attorney nowadays, they'll tell you that common law and case law are synonymous. That's what they were taught in law school.
That's what I was thinking people would think. They'd be like, well, it's just case law. I mean, we're just going off like how people have ruled and stuff, like in the
Right.
past about, things that happen with people. Yeah, but ruled based on the statutes in the beginning.
Right. Really, what it is, it's an opinion. That's all it is. Right.
Hmm.
Case law is opinion
Right.
of another judge from another time in another case. So there's
Right.
no two cases are identical. Right? They may have the same
Right.
elements
Right.
to
Right.
them, right? But they aren't identical. So
Hmm.
you see how tricky it gets now, right? You can't appeal to your peers in your unique situation, because the last 500 decisions around this topic all stem from this 1906 decision by the honorable so and so such and such that decided that when these situations arise, this is the way we're going to rule.
So you'll come in with a case and they'll be like, yeah, it's similar to that. I mean, this is what's up. This is what we're doing. And you're like, hold on, I demand a fair trial. And they're like, well, I mean, we already have all the case law for that. So it's this way. And you
Yep,
can't do anything about it if you're
that's
playing their game.
that's it. That's it. So you could see what damage that the merging of these two types of law caused.
Hmm.
And today, it's even you get into deeper weed. People call it this. They call this maritime or admiralty law. Is what most people law of the water, law of the sea.
Hmm.
And it's really it's neither common law or equity. It's this new form of jurisdiction And, the really clever guys have figured out that what's really happening is they call it in rem. And so it just means about the matter, about the property. And you are the property, even though you don't realize it. But these judges can shift between jurisdictions depending on words that are said, things that are agreed upon. So they actually have the ability to move between these jurisdictions depending on how the parties in the matter are behaving.
Which jurisdictions can they shift between?
So this is where you can get yourself into a common law. You can get yourself back into it. So they didn't eliminate the common law court. They just overlaid it onto the general way things are done.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a few guys that I've researched over the past few years who have managed to access the common law courts,
right,
by saying the right things, doing the right things, and not agreeing to what's happening. It seems to be that the judge is always trying to get you to agree on certain items that get you back into this maritime admiralty jurisdiction so that they can take back control. Yes?
Yeah. So if you're totally willing to just rock up and be like, yeah, I'll take statutory law. Cool, thank you. Now I'd like to argue my case, please. Like if you don't know what's going on, you're losing before you even begin.
This brings us back around to this birth certificate straw man, all capital letters name onto the birth certificate has created this trust. And if you recall, I talked about the Sesta K trust in a previous broadcast, right? Where if the son of the liege lord didn't come back and claim his property after 7 years, then they could distribute the estate accordingly. And what happens here is that even though it's known as an implied trust, I don't want to get into too much detail here, but as opposed to an express trust, where you didn't know, your mom didn't know that you were actually signing you up for this implied trust, which is the Sesta K trust in effect. And if you don't claim that trust when you reach the age of majority, which is 18, in certainly all the Commonwealth nations, when you don't claim that trust, that you're the beneficiary of that trust, you unwittingly become the trustee for that trust. Trustee means you're responsible for managing and administrating that trust. Even though you have no knowledge, this is what implied means, is that you don't have to, as the grantor of the trust, you don't have to tell people that they're the beneficiary of the trustee. They don't have to be named in an implied trust. And so what's happening is when you agree, you're this name, and the judge says, isn't your name John Quincy Adams? And you say yes, that you are agreeing that you're the trustee for this trust that you're unaware of.
Right. So the judge is like, you're this guy here, right? On the birth certificate says this is you.
Of course.
Can you prove it? And you're like, I can certainly prove it.
Right. The legal documents all have this all capitals name.
Right.
So you listen to a lot of these scholars on this now, is they say, just don't do anything verbally. Do it all in writing. So when they ask you, are you this name? And then you see this all capitals name, you say, no, I'm not that name.
Oh, right. Because if it's verbal, you can't even detect what they're saying.
Right. They got you coming and going.
Right.
So if you just step into court and they say, now for the matter of John Quincy Adams, and you step in and walk up to the podium and say, yes, sir, I'm here. You're already finished. Right. I think the judge does have to ask you, are you John Quincy Adams? As soon as you say yes, you're in their jurisdiction. And it's a heck of a wrangle to get out of it at that point.
Right. And I mean, I don't think this is the podcast where we say what you're meant to say, right? But just we're calling out the problem.
Yep.
The situation in this podcast.
Yep. Yeah. So what you should, and this is the problem, and who knows what we'll do in the future on this, but this is the real catch of all of these solutions that people have. And I'll try to go over these certainly here in a moment. But you have to know what to do based on, 1,000 different things happening. in order to not get caught up in this. And, the many situations I've listened to, you can see that these people that are caught up in these situations, while they may make a step forward out of, getting out of these situations, as soon as they make one step, right, the judge comes back with something else and they don't know what to do. Each step along the way, they don't know how to respond. And, this is my kind of my closing idea that I'll get to here, but they don't realize who they are. And the judge is treating them like the trustee for the trust and will continue to do so until you realize who you really are. And that's the crux of the matter. Right.
Right.
As long as you are in these situations feeling subservient, right, that you're in this weak position of weakness, and the judge is the power and the boss. If you're in that mindset, you're going to get trampled on every single time. So it doesn't matter how much you learn, how well you study this, how much you understand it. If you behave, we've talked about this, right? If you behave in this way, that you are bowing down to this judge, then you will be drawn back into this legal system. And
right. I mean, I'll give the example that we've given. Like it's like if you rock up at the court and you've watched this thing on the internet where some guy told you it's all about the birth certificate. And you're like, get my real birth certificate. So, you go to whatever lengths you need to do to get your birth certificate, your real birth certificate. And then you go in and you wave it around and show the judge. And you're like, I'm not that trust. I'm this real man here, this name and not my last name. I'm real. Got the birth certificate. Right? That's like a man who's trying to get women or something, and he goes up to the woman with just a pickup line, and she's or just not a pickup line, but like a cool opener, and she's like, "Oh, very impressive, very impressive." But then she's going to test you, 100 more times, right? So just having one little technique with your little certificate is not going to make you feel like you're the the prize or whatever, right? You're not going to feel like you're the real sovereign king man, right? So that's why this is not just finding out the little techniques that you say to the judge. It's really a journey of self-discovery and becoming your ideal man, the man you're supposed to be. Do you want to put that in an even better way, Brad?
Well, yeah, you have to act like you are. That first of all, you can't act like some other man or woman can tell you what to do. What gives them that authority to just boss me around and make an exclamation and slam a gavel and say, "This is my final decision." It's like, who are you? You're just another man, right? Acting as a judge. So it's that kind of mentality, right? It's like if you're up there trying to prove with paperwork that you aren't the Sesticate trust, you aren't the trustee. This is you've recaptured your birth certificate. You're actually trying to convince this judge that you aren't what he's presuming you are. So you're in this position of weakness. Like, don't you agree, judge? So
it's proven, right? You agree with me, yeah? Like we're going to proceed like I want, yeah?
Right. That's the position that you're putting yourself in. And I've heard so many people crash and burn in these situations. Mm-hmm. These recordings of this guy in traffic court trying to fight this. And, hopefully I'll just say this now. The most important thing. Well, let me ask you, what do you think is the most important thing in the legal system? Most important concept to understand in the legal system?
The most important concept to understand in the legal system, and I assume it's not a concept that we've covered already. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, what does it implies? What does the legal system imply? That they're there to do what?
Well, I would just say it's if I had to guess, right, I would say that it's the difference between law and the legal system.
Right, but what's the goal? Right? What would you presume, not knowing anything? What is the goal of the legal system?
Well, according to them, the goal is to rule. To rule on what is done. But
So most people would say, right, they would say, we're here to examine the facts of the case and arrive at a just decision, right? That's what everybody thinks is the function of
oh,
the
okay.
legal system.
Sorry, I wouldn't have come up with that because I don't think I don't think of that they do that
Right.
at all.
But that's the idea that's the impression we're given is that
Right, right.
they've all these years of training and the
Oh yeah,
real
the lawyers and the judges are there to like figure out the truth and make sure that the right thing happens, right? Yeah, isn't that
right,
it?
right, right. So in reality, the key, and this is what all these sovereign guys and freedom guys just screw up left and right. They don't get it. That the whole key is to be in honor. That is the key to being successful in the legal system. To be
Right,
behaving honorably. That's why we
right,
call the judge your honor.
right.
And he of course is required to behave honorably.
Hmm.
And as soon as you start behaving dishonorably, it doesn't matter how many truths or facts you're spewing, doesn't matter. You are gonna be stomped on.
Well, it's interesting you put it that way. That I guess what you're suggesting is the most important concept is honor. Is that what you're suggesting?
That's it. By a landslide.
Well, that's very interesting. And I may have even told you this already. Maybe we've discussed this, but Ayn Rand said that honor is self-esteem manifest. Like
Mm.
self-esteem is like the internal and the way and the actions that show someone with self-esteem is honor.
Mm.
So, and self-esteem is like what we talked previously, like knowing who you are, knowing you're a man or woman and who
There you
you really
go.
are. And
You
honor
just
is the
connected the
manifestation
dots.
of that.
Right. So we are in effect behaving dishonorably in a sense, right? When we kowtow, right? Lower our heads and take the whipping.
Right. And also when
Because
we're like, but you can't do that. That's not fair. I'm this. And that's not honorable either.
arguing is not honorable.
Right.
It's like making a statement of fact and claiming it with conviction is honorable.
Right.
But
Because an honorable person, a person with real self-esteem is someone who really observes reality honestly and their convictions are in line with reality and they know it and they have no doubt. They don't have self-doubt. So they don't need to argue because all they need to do is just say what they know is, and that's sufficient. That's all there is to do. And they're not going to argue and spit about it that someone else doesn't get it. They're just, well, this person's going to get it or they're not.
and this strategy has worked for people who understand all of this, right? And I'm not suggesting anybody go out and try this, but so here's the idea. We'll just use the speeding ticket idea, of course, right? Show up in court
Mm.
and they say, well, you're 10 miles an hour of the speed limit. Here's your $200 fine. How do you plead? Say, Your Honor, I'd like to cross examine the person that says I caused them wrong or harm, and that right because you haven't caused anybody, right? A crime against the state. There's nobody. The state isn't a thing. It's a fiction,
Right.
right? So you didn't cause the police officer who pulled you over any wrong or harm. So you say, well, Officer Smith, clocked you at 10 miles over the speed limit. I didn't cause anybody any harm. What's
Right.
the penalty here?
And it's even plausible that it's not a crime because imagine you're out on a deserted road, no one around for miles, and you crank it up over the speed limit. Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Technically, there's no crime at all if nobody's been harmed
Okay.
or there was no
I guess
intent to harm.
like if
Right?
you're speeding, dodging through passengers, I'm sorry, not passengers, pedestrians, right? That and you don't hurt anybody. Maybe you could still say there's something wrong there, but
Well, those
there
people
must be
could
some
say
line.
that crazy guy almost killed me. Dart between passengers. So I'm taking him to court, right? For
Oh,
driving
okay,
in this
sure,
way.
right. But this, yeah,
So,
but the state can't really do it, right? Who's the state?
right, there's nobody there. So that's why they need a
Okay,
representative, right? They need a representative of the state to talk, to enliven, to put in motion the fictional entity, which is the state. Now, of course, would be the
right.
prosecutor.
Okay,
But in traffic court, there's not even a prosecutor. There's just the judge. If need be, the police officer is there to bear witness to your supposed crime. So this method won't work because people have tried it in the past. So I think most of the judges are aware of it. But hopefully you get a sense of
hmm
where you technically stand correct, saying I didn't harm anybody. Now, if somebody
right,
would step forward and say that I harmed them, I'll be happy to compensate them accordingly
right,
for
right.
whatever harm I caused them. I banged into their car and caused them $1,000 worth of damage.
hmm
So this is the idea, right? It's that and what they're really tapping into. They're not only are they tapping into your own personal money when you get these fines, but they're also taking out money out of your trust that you don't know about. That
To
money is
pay
being
for
distributed.
the court fees and stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. That's right.
Okay.
So just showing up, they're making money. Even if
Hmm.
the judge finds you innocent for whatever reason. But you can do a whole host of things. You could say, I wasn't speeding. He must have clocked somebody else. Police officer says,
hmm
no, there was no other cars around. I saw some cars around. So that at this stage, it's my word against his word,
Right.
right?
Although,
Right. You could
if you're
say,
honorable, you would be honest.
sure. But I'm just saying this is
So we're assuming the case where there were cars around.
right. And there's a number of different ways you can go at this just to get out of the ticket. But the goal isn't to get out of the ticket. The goal here is to understand, right, what's going on, why it's going
hmm
on. We all
Right.
agree that you shouldn't be able to drive 80 miles an hour on your residential street. That's not good for anybody. So this is just a common. Most people have had a speeding ticket in their life, so they understand what the situation is. But
hmm
this is, again, this is traffic court, which is even different than this other admiralty maritime thing I'm almost talking about. But there's all these different types of courts. There's divorce court, there's tax court, there's traffic court,
Hmm.
and all of these have little different sets of rules. Family court that are different from what we would expect a lawful procedure to be,
Right. Right. Right.
which
So
is
these
somewhat.
courts are creations of the legal system
That's
based
right.
on statutes.
That's right. They make up the rules. They make up the rules of engagement, the rules of the game, and what you can and can't argue. One of my favorite guys just, he he finally arrived at the conclusion that you can't win in these courts. It's because, number one, they're speaking a language you don't understand, which is legalese. You're not expected to understand it.
hmm
And if you hire an attorney in these situations, he plays in the legalese game, and you're at the mercy of what can be done in this legalese game. And more often than not, if the state has brought charges against somebody for whatever reason, you're going to lose. It's not always the case, but it's more often than not, it's the case. They don't bring cases they don't think they can win.
Hmm.
So his general strategy is that you do whatever, even though they bring complaints in the legal system. His strategy is to make a claim against the actual men and women involved in your case. So you don't make a claim against the state of New York
hmm
or the prosecutor. You make it against John Smith, the man, sometimes acting as the prosecutor, and bring it against Lisa Johnson, the judge, or Lisa Johnson, sometimes acting as the judge in such family court and so forth. They actually go after the people.
And for
And
what specifically?
well, you would there would in the most cases is that they're trying to take something from you, right?
Oh,
Your
okay.
property in some way, right? So they're
What
coming
what
after
what would
your
that crime be called?
well, it's
It sounds like
trespass.
a crime. I just want trespass. Okay, trespass. So trying to take someone's property. It's called trespassing.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you can call it stealing or theft or anything else, but the key to understanding this idea is that it's all very simple. There's
Hmm.
no reason to complicate things. Say this thing is mine, and no other man or woman has the right to take it away.
Right. And you crooks are formed a little statutory court here. It's just a gang of thugs, and you're trying to do that. So,
Right.
and I'm
If they
suing you
don't
two
like
people who are part of it.
right, if they don't like the way you're behaving, even though you've caused no wrong or harm to anybody, they
Hmm.
can take away your stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
thousand different variations of that. And you're basically walking into a court of claim, a common law court. You're saying, who gives you the right to take away my stuff? Or where did you get that? Where do you think you got that right?
Right.
And they have to then defend what they're doing.
So they
So,
have to defend that. Like it's a fair common law claim, right? So they have to defend that before they can proceed with what they're trying to do to you.
right, a claim trumps a complaint.
Ah.
So, what usually happens is that they drop the complaint, and then
Oh.
by virtue of that, you drop the claim. In other words, they don't take your stuff, and so you have nothing. Your claim is gone because they didn't take your stuff.
Okay. Sure.
That's what happens. Like, no, I haven't seen a situation where these are seen through, but I've seen this as a strategy.
Hmm.
And a lot of these that I've looked at are it's with child protective services is where this is especially egregious, as I understand things. This is where a lot of these guys spend most of their time. Right. So
Hmm.
somebody makes an accusation that you're mistreating your child. Right? They saw you, beating your child or whatever. They call, anonymously call CPS. And the next thing you know, CPS is at your door. It's up to them to decide whether or not they can take your child or not. It's not up to you.
Hmm.
And now suddenly you're guilty until proven innocent. And you've got to go in there and try to prove that you didn't do the thing that your neighbor saw or whatever. And this has been used nefariously as well by a lot of people to
Right. I can imagine.
grab children. So seems to be this is where a lot of these problems happen. But it happens, in a lot of times in little counties and little cities where somebody doesn't like somebody else. They kind of
Hmm.
make up some stuff, and it goes on and on and on. But again, the idea is here is that you need to be able to face off with your accuser in a neutral situation where you have a jury and you can let that jury decide whether what's happening is righteous or not.
Okay. So maybe
Make
having reached
sense?
this point, maybe it's appropriate to like summarize the situation that this legal system is now in and what what we're to do in your opinion
Right.
just about this whole general thing. Like how do we proceed as humanity given all this?
Well, it takes some real understanding to see what the position we've been placed in because of this, right?
Hmm.
And what further happens is that when you hire an attorney, you're admitting you're either an imbecile or an infant. You can't handle any of this stuff.
Right.
So you become at the mercy of your attorney's ability to defend you or not. You don't get to defend it. So you've got to play by their rules,
Hmm.
right? So,
Hmm.
and it's all too complicated and elaborate for you to handle. You just have to sit back and watch it happen.
Yeah. So if you're seeing, okay, so basically these three episodes have established the fact, I think pretty well, that there is a legal system created by some people, and we've never met, and they have overlaid their system upon the law and tricked us into believing that it is the law, and that we're somehow supposed to be involved in their system and go to them for the rulings on our life or something. And
You're
we
getting it.
need to figure out that it's a whole bunch of nonsense. And we like it seems like you can't just do it just one person, right? So you gotta let everybody know, like, hey guys, this whole thing's a bunch of nonsense, and we all have to withdraw from it, right?
Yeah, and it's what's even trickier is that the attorneys don't understand this. The the court clerks don't understand this. The bailiffs don't understand. They, as far as they're aware, for the last 80 years in America, certainly, they're just going along with what everybody's done.
Right.
So
It's
what
just
what
case
happened?
law.
Well, what happened is that this bar association just took over. These are, so allegedly we have public courthouses, right? This is where the public can go to settle matters,
Hmm.
but there's really nothing public about them. This legal system runs and controls them completely.
Right. They're like
So
squatting in the courthouse and
they
pretending
are
that they run it.
right, and whatever, everybody at the courthouse does exactly whatever the judge says. Well, the judge said this, so this is the rules. Like if you want to bring your cameras into the courtroom, the judge says no cameras. That's it. You can't bring cameras, even though it's a public courthouse,
Right.
right? Where that means the public should be able to sit in and observe the events and make sure everything's on the up and up. Can't do that.
Hmm.
One judge can make that decision, and they all make that decision. You basically can't bring recording equipment into courtrooms, even though it's a public courtroom. They can kick everybody out if they want, make a ruling that you don't understand how it was arrived at. All sorts of things can happen. And
Right.
if you want to file a common law court of record case, the bailiffs, or I'm sorry, the county clerks will take your case and they'll refill it out. They'll refill out their paperwork so that it fits into the statutory realm. So
Right.
you've got this. You're going to get into this situation with the clerk, and the clerk doesn't know. They just look at you walk in there with your filing, whatever it is, 2 pages. So and so wronged me, and this is what they did, and they took my property, and I want it back. They'll take it, turn it into how that fits into the statutory realm. And of course, they'll refile you as the all capitals name, and they'll call you plaintiff, right? They'll call the wrongdoer
Mm.
defendant. We didn't get into the
Ugh.
legal words, right? Citizen, person, resident, defendant, plaintiff. These are all artificial entities that only exist in the legal system. Right? So in the lawful system, it was man against woman, or man against man, or woman against man. But now, when they transform you into plaintiff or defendant, you're now a legal entity, and that
Hmm.
all these rules of civil procedure are attached to those entities now.
Right.
And the list goes on and on and on with and it's these little subtle changes that transform the man standing on the land to the artificial entity that can now participate in this. Really, it's a commercial endeavor. It's commerce.
Right.
It's what's dictating all of this. Corpus juris secundum is now what they call the book of statutes, effectively. And in addition to the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC governs all activities, covers everything.
Mm. Whoa. I bet most of us don't bother to check that book out.
Oh, well, yeah. The Corpus Juris Secundum is hundreds of volumes, or 80 volumes, or whatever. It's a big, massive, tremendous amount of information. And it's
Right.
deliberately long and obfuscating and confusing. That's the purpose of it.
Hmm.
No layperson could ever figure it all out. So that's the situation that they've thrown us into. And I guess maybe I'll leave it with this: is that we all agree that when you cause harm to somebody, you need to compensate them. There's no debate
Right.
about that. And so that those types of situations are handled by the legal system, but this is, it's overlaid with their method of getting to these. This is the whole murder 1 or involuntary manslaughter 5 and all the rest of that stuff, right? If you
Right.
stop and really think about it, you don't need any of those statutes, because a jury of reasonable adults can make a determination when a case shows up before them. They can determine, did this person harm this other person? And if they agree that they did, then they can agree on a rational, reasonable penalty associated with that, right? Whether it's financial or jail time or whatever. Right?
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder whether it's the fact that we got so lazy and just delegated all our responsibility away. Because one time I heard Putin say that, well, rights go hand in hand with responsibilities.
That's a
we,
big part of it. That's a big
yeah,
part of it. And to be clear, that the legal system is necessary to handle the artificial entities, which are billions
right,
of them, right? The
right,
corporations,
right.
they,
Every
they
single
don't have
corporation, right?
rights,
Yeah.
right? So they have been granted their rights based on the statutes and the acts and the codes that enliven these artificial entities. So certainly, attorneys are needed for that. This is the personal, man or woman dealing with the system of justice that we're talking
Hmm.
about here. And basically, if no wrong or harm was caused, then there's no cause of action. There should be no cause of action. You cannot harm the state.
Right.
That's what it comes down
State
to,
shouldn't be able to bring case against you because
right?
who are they?
There is no state. That doesn't
Right.
exist. Now, if you're behaving in a bad way, then your neighbors, your people in your city or at your work or whatever can bring the case against you, right? If you are behaving in an unbecoming way, you really
Hmm.
are, then they can put forth a case that you're causing them harm in some way, or your negligent behavior is likely to cause them harm. Then
Right.
a
Right.
jury, rational peers can say, agree, yeah, he drives 80 miles an hour up and down, our residential street. One of these days, he's going to run over a dog or hit a kid. And so they can all collectively agree that's bad for the community and they can rule appropriately.
Yeah, I think
Yes?
we'll move closer. Like the outcome clearly that we want is we want to just be able to interact with each other and just we want to rely on a judge to be fair and referee correctly, and we want to be able to rely on 12 people to I guess rule on the case appropriately. And so, as we move toward that, part of it is like we all have to become honorable and trustworthy and become these types of people that could be judges and could be jury members. We need to learn to be able to actually identify reality correctly and know what's right and what's wrong. And until we have that manifest, we're going to remain with this crappy system that stands in for that.
Well, yeah, and here's where I wanted to leave this, Matt. So I wanted to leave you with a big mind blown zone zinger here at the end, which is to
Okay.
suggest that things had to be this way due to the consciousness of humanity. We weren't really prepared to handle our affairs correctly because we were in such a degraded state of consciousness. And
Yeah.
so this was required to basically rein in a society not fully in touch with reality.
Right.
And what we're now, and the reason that people are breaking through with this now is that we're starting to understand what has happened. And if we choose individually, we wish to extricate ourselves from this system. In other words, be responsible and self-governing. That option is now presenting itself to the people that are ready to take that step.
Right. Right.
But,
Yeah.
but for the people who aren't, right, this system needs to be in place for the people who are not ready yet for
Right.
self-governorship. That makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this
Well,
is
I
where,
like the sound of that. This how you put it. This option is presenting itself. That we can soon take this option. We can have our own justice, not even a justice system, but we can perform justice together. Right.
right. People were slowly picked away at this the last 30 or 40 years, and a lot of them fell into some traps and got themselves into trouble. And it was a cause of some jail time for certain people. And little by little, but all of a sudden, in the last 5 years or so, people have kind of completely understood the full gravity of what's been done, how it's been
Mm-hmm.
done, and how one
Right.
can extricate themselves from the system. But not until these last 5 years or so has that
Right.
confidence arisen in a lot of people that now we get it. Now we understand who they think we are and how they're treating us. And in order to get yourself out of it, you have to become, responsible and self-governing and behave
Right.
in an honorable way.
Right.
And
You have to
if
become
you,
the kind of man or woman who can do this, who
right,
can act in all these ways.
right, you have to educate yourself. You have to understand what's happening. So it isn't just let me fill out this paperwork and I'm all set, which is what a lot of
Right. I
these
got the
groups
birth
are doing.
certificate.
They call it status correction. Fill out the status correction paperwork and you're good to go. It's not enough. It's not nearly enough. It's really understanding the basis of this, and not that we're, a lot of people are uh, confrontational and and angry with this system, right? And so they treat it as an
Hmm.
adversary, and it's
Right.
the
Right.
wrong
Right.
attitude to have. It's the wrong
Right.
attitude.
And it's not
Much
honorable.
That's exactly. I was going to say that's the whole key: is can you behave honorably and present
Right.
yourself as the man or the woman? Show the judge that you know who you are and you know when you've done wrong, when you haven't done wrong, and behave accordingly. It's at that point that this legal system can start to fall away for those that are ready to make that step. That's the key.
Right. Mind blown.
So that's it. Hopefully I left it a little bit different than the other people that are talking about it. But that's how I wanted to finish this off, with that notion. So hopefully some people may be stimulated to learn and understand a little bit more. And if we get some feedback from listeners, we can dive into what that might entail, and provide some learning resources for people who want to uh, make this trek into self-governorship.
Sure. I'll mention a bit on that. Well, I think what you've left it on is that the way you've put it is that this is, you know, a journey of self discovery. That's why we say that the mind blown zone is a bridge to self discovery. Like we introduce these topics to you, but then present, if you want to actually take advantage of this, or, it's not a matter of just some magic techniques, right? It's a self discovery process to transform or to remember who you are, to transform into who you intend to become, or remember who you are, is depending on how you want to put it. And yeah, so this is what it's about. It's not just a magic little birth certificate or little technique, that line that you can say to the judge. And I think you know we haven't at the time of recording this, we haven't put out courses or books or anything. But Brad is working. Am I okay to mention this, Brad?
Sure, sure, sure.
Brad's working on a book that's, he's already told me the outline and the things he plans to cover. It's going to be amazing. And at some point in the future, and if you're watching this far enough into the future, we're recording this in 2023, you'll be able to see Brad's book, Titles of Slavery, down further on the page. And we're also we're just brewing the idea of a video course where we teach really high level stuff in the self discovery vein and knowledge accumulation vein, to bring you to the kind of outcomes that we've described here. And that'll be on this page as well. But not, if you're watching right now, then not yet. But it's coming. Okay, so take a look below, and if it's there, well, I highly recommend you get it. Anything else you'd like to add, Brad?
Nope, that should do it. Fantastic. Thanks, Matt. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And we look forward to responding to questions or putting some more material out in the future along these lines.
Sure. Okay. Have a great day, everybody, and catch you on the next one. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye bye.
everybody.